How high should the expectations be for Oregon basketball right now and going forward? Well, I'll start with Dana Altman's squad. I expect them to win on Friday. That would be a huge disappointment if they don't do that. But beyond what happens in this tournament, and I've said for a long time, Oregon has the talent and ability, which they have showcased time and again, to beat anybody in college basketball. I mean, they beat Alabama. Alabama's beaten Auburn, who's a number one overall seed. They beat Texas A&M, who's also beaten Auburn. Texas A&M might have win over Florida mixed in there as well. Texas A&M's a 4 seed. Wisconsin, who they, of course, had a great comeback win against on the road, beat them in Madison. That's a 3 seed. So they've got 3 wins on their resume of what is mostly the same team, which is refreshing that Oregon hasn't had to deal with mountains and mountains of injuries this year. That same team has that same potential to play at that level. But as we've seen throughout the course of this year, sitting at 24-9 is, I believe, what their record's at right now. They're a team that can really lose to anyone because they've had a tendency sometimes to play down to their competition, and it's really annoying. However, it's March Madness. They're a 5 seed. Talked about it on yesterday's show. It hasn't been, a spotted owl sort of occurrence to see a 5 seed make a run to the Final Four. San Diego State made a run to the national championship game as a 5 seed a couple of years ago. Miami was in the Final Four that same year. Kansas won the whole thing in 2008 as a 5 seed. So, my expectations for this year is for Oregon to win at least one game and then for the next game to be competitive at the very least. In March, win or go home, it's tough to win tight games. Sometimes they go their way, sometimes you don't. What I would be disappointed in seeing is if Oregon either loses on Friday to Liberty in Seattle, or if they win that game and then they go to the next round, play Arizona, and what happened in the 2021 tournament with LJ Figueroa and Chris Duarte and Eugene from Eugene, Eugene Omoruyi, of course, his name, given the name Eugene from Eugene by the late Bill Walton, RIP forever and always. That team played USC and got torched. Okay, that would be disappointing. But if they go out, and I'd love to see them get to the Sweet 16, of course, I would love to continue with in-season content rather than rolling into the off-season content world, which there will be plenty of interesting options and questions for this Oregon basketball team. But that's what my expectation is. My hope, as always, they go to the Final Four, have a chance to play for a national championship. They have an incredibly favorable draw. The East region is the most gettable region of the 4. I think the Midwest is the next most gettable. I think the South is probably the toughest, and the West is also pretty brutal. But in the East, you've got Alabama, who Oregon has beaten before. Hard to beat a team twice. We know that. But Alabama doesn't play a lot of defense. One of their guys is hurt. Wisconsin has not been a super trustworthy team in the tournament for quite a long time. Duke has got an injury they're dealing with for Cooper Flag. Like, it's tough. There are just a lot of reasons to look at the East region and go, kind of feels like it's the most open, most up in the air. So that's my expectation on that side. On the women's side, at least, again, I look at the women's first game because of where the program was at last year and say the same thing that I say about Oregon's hypothetical second round game. Is it would be disappointing if you get to that spot and get blown out. Doesn't mean it'd be a failed season. Just means it would be a disappointing end, which unfortunately Oregon fans, I'm sure we're all familiar with at this point. So, the women take on Vanderbilt. Kelly Graves has been pretty dangerous as a double-digit seed in his career, but I look at both of these programs right now beyond or outside of this tournament, and I hope that they've reestablished the standard because there was a 2-year stretch going into last year where Oregon didn't make the NCAA tournament. And guess what? That kind of stunk and felt like, man, this is not what Dana Altman has been. Why are they losing games to teams that they should beat? And that's really all that was keeping them out of the tournament. They got better this year, took a major step forward in that regard. But, like with football, it's a process, it's a build. You don't go from being way away from a national championship to suddenly, boom, there we are right up there. It can take some time, both for a coaching staff and for individual players on a roster as well. So what I would like to see and what my expectation is for both of these coaches and the resources that they have and the caliber of coaches that I know they are, they should be in the tournament every year. That's where both of these programs are fully capable of being. I know it's a new era in the NIL and the portal, and I think there was more of an adjustment to that on the women's side than on the men's side. But now that they're kind of up to speed and have shown, hey, they can be, close to the top of the conference, well, yeah, I think that that's a reasonable expectation beyond just what happens this weekend. So, that's, something I'll definitely assess based on what happens in these tournament results this weekend, but it's right around the corner. And I got a rarely seen basketball question to wrap up today's show. This from Jasper Stromey 2778. I didn't say anything when you were excited about Raheem Moss when he was transferring. I didn't like his play at Toledo. The film showed him standing around off the ball too much. Just curious your thoughts on why he wasn't much of a contributor. Well, let's say it isn't because he's not injured, nor has the season ended just yet. Keep it present tense, keep it optimistic. But at Toledo last year, he was a first-team All-MAC selection, first-team All-Defensive selection in that league. 15.5 point a game scorer, 5.5 rebounds, 3 assists, almost 2 steals per game. He shot 46% from the floor, 31% from 3. So this year, he's attempted just 16 triples all season. He's only made 2 of them, which hasn't been great. And he's only averaging 1.6 points per game. I mean, anytime he scores, it feels like a major added bonus. And it's, something that hasn't been something I've thought about relying on or say, oh, Oregon needs it. No, it just feels, if you get 4 to 5 points from Raheem Moss off the bench, you're doing great. Now, did I think that he would be more productive this year? Until TJ Bamba came in, yeah, he probably would have been Oregon's starting 2 guard. But what you run into when you go from a mid-major conference like the MAC or, other low-major conferences across the country, and you take a step up to the Big Ten, what you can find is that your athleticism is not as comparable or superior as it was your prior school. I think that's what Moss has found. He does not find a way to get a lot of easy shots. Now, he also doesn't get the ball a ton because it's not what this team needs him to do. In the few minutes he comes off the bench, what he is asked to do is play hard-nosed defense, and that's about it, and score if the opportunity comes about. But I think one of the reasons he doesn't have a bigger role, like Bam Tracy does coming off the bench from an offensive standpoint, is he's not a knockdown shooter. 31% from 3 is fine. I mean, I would kill for TJ Bamba to be shooting 31% from 3 right now. He's not, even though he's historically great at that. It's just what it is. But for Raheem Moss, a 31% three-point shooter, a year ago, I think he had a couple other seasons where he was slightly better than that. But when he was getting the ball, playing a ton last year, did a lot of damage kind of in the mid-range area, wasn't going out and hitting 38 to 40% of his threes. And so when you can't just spot up, the way that you get points is you beat guys off the dribble. Well, when you're playing against higher caliber athletes than what you went up against in the MAC, that gets a lot tougher. So I think those two things have kind of compounded. I definitely didn't think before the year he'd be averaging less than 2 points a game. I thought he'd be closer to 4 or 5 off a game or per game off the bench. But he's certainly someone who I'm glad Oregon has, because he and Mookie Cook both can kind of come in and just give you defense in spurts, and that can lead to offense at times. But I thought his role would be slightly bigger, but overall, is he one of the most important guys to watch going into the tournament? No, he could not play in a game, and Oregon could beat Liberty on Friday. But I don't expect that to be the case, but sometimes that's the way the cookie crumbles. So that's how we end today's show. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.